In 1958, W. L. Gore and Associates was founded by Bill and Vive Gore. Bill had originally set out to develop a process to more efficiently insulate electrical wire. What they developed led to the company's first patent and rapid growth. By 1969, Gore, via its lightweight cable, had already traveled to the moon with astronauts Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong. Then, the discoveries that came with expanding their material changed everything. They discovered that this unique material could simultaneously perform two contradictory functions. It allowed small molecules, vapor, to pass while blocking larger molecules like water droplets. In clothing, it created a material that could protect the wearer from precipitation on the outside, while allowing perspiration to evaporate from the inside. This discovery would later become known by us all as waterproof, breathable Gore-Tex, and it would revolutionize outerwear. But associates within Gore would say that it's not the technology that has sustained their success, but rather their unique culture. And this explains how they were able to discover more than 1,000 different applications of their material, including guitar strings, car headlamps, dental floss, aortic stent grafts, and fuel cells in our hybrids. This powerful culture has more coaches than bosses, shuns titles, policies, and hierarchies, and lets fellow employees determine who the real leaders are among them. And to help us get how this organization operates, I interviewed their CEO, Terry Kelly. Terry joined Gore in 1983 after graduating summa cum laude in mechanical engineering from the University of Delaware. In 2005, Terry was nominated by her fellow peers to succeed the retiring CEO. After board approval, Terry became only the fourth CEO in the history of this amazing company that generates more than $2.5 billion in annual revenues, never experienced a loss in 50 years, and has appeared on every one of Fortune magazine's 100 best companies to work for since the survey started in 1984. In addition to being the CEO of Gore, Terry is the mother of 4 daughters ages 5 to 13 and resides with her husband in Delaware. So let's hear from Terry now. Well, Terry, before we get started in our conversation, I just want to thank you for being a part of the Summit faculty this year. I am so glad that it worked out.
Oh, it's great. I'm glad to be here. In fact, I've learned so much just after we spoke about what you're all about. It's been fascinating.
Well, that's great. As I've studied Gore, it seems to me that so much of the DNA of Gore came out of Bill and Vive Gore, the founders. What were they trying to do? What was their story?
Both of them cared very deeply about the kind of organization that they wanted to create. And so probably more so than the business model and how we were going to actually be successful, I think what they recognized that if you don't create the right foundation and values, that fundamentally is what's going to drive your success. And so for Bill, he always knew that for you to be innovative, you had to create an environment of collaboration. You had to have people that wanted to work together. Mm-hmm. And so he thought long and hard about how do you foster that kind of environment.
Where did this come up? Yeah. Did he, I know that he worked for DuPont. Right. I mean, did he get it from DuPont?
Certainly one aspect he really liked about DuPont is when they had a problem or they had a special project, they would form these task forces or teams. Mm. And what he observed is they behave very differently when they were all kind of thrown in a room and they had a sense of urgency. They got to know each other. They drove cars together. And so the personal relationships that formed, as they were solving these problems was just a very different dynamic. And so he said, why can't you form a whole company around that? Why does it have to be only when you have the special project and only a special focus? So the whole power of small teams really evolved from his DuPont task force experience. So that was kind of one element. And then
cross-functions.
Cross-function, again, really creating a different level of ownership. Obviously, DuPont was a very large company, and one of the challenges as any company grows is how do people not feel like a number? How do they really feel they can make a difference? So that really, again, shaped his thinking about the concept of the power of small teams, that even as we get larger, we can organize around opportunities that people really feel they can make a difference.
So if I were a brand new employee at Gore, mm-hmm. I come right in, let's say I've had experience in Fortune 500 companies, and I come in, what's so different about Gore? What would I start picking up as being just very unique, distinct, different than?
It truly is a peer-based organization. We work collectively together. It's not the leader and everyone else. So everyone understands their job is to make everyone else successful. It's not just about their own personal success. So that really fundamental investment of time to build the relationships, get to know what each of us are capable of providing, is a critical shift in your thinking in terms of you come in, you work, and then you go home. So people are much more vested in terms of owning both their own outcome and feeling responsible, but also feeling part of the whole in terms of I can really make a difference here, and I truly care about the success of the organization.
What about, I mean, I've heard a term used, on-demand hierarchy. What do you mean by that?
So I think the misnomer is we don't have people in responsible roles, and right. Certainly we have structure. Sometimes I get accused that we have too much structure, which is always healthy. I think the difference is if there's a formal hierarchy that's fixed, it always assumes that the person at the top of the hierarchy is the most knowledgeable and that they're really going to direct the rest of the organization. But if you think about how decisions are made, it shifts based on who really has the knowledge, who really has the vantage point that truly is the best person to drive a decision. So what we'd like to create is an environment where that shift of who's taking the lead, who's driving the decision is not a fixed structure, but it very much is situational. And so that kind of hierarchy on demand, that concept comes from we really want it to occur naturally based on where the knowledge is, which really allows a lot more of your population to contribute to decision making. And I think that's the beauty of it. Whereas a fixed hierarchy, unfortunately, all the decisions kind of go up the ladder, they come down the ladder, and it really doesn't necessarily get the best of the organization.
Yeah. Also, talk to us about ladder versus lattice organization. And you guys would be a lattice organization.
Exactly. The lattice concept was that really we're all connected by a series of nodes, which the analogy is actually around some of the structures of our materials that are very important to us. But the idea is we all want to connect with each other. So rather than there may be only 2 contact points that I have with my leader or superior, what you really want to encourage is that everyone is connecting with everyone in their network, and we want people to go right to the source, directly to who they need to get to get information or to get things moving.
Now, the other thing that I saw that actually, it was kind of shocking when I read this quote, but I have a quote that you said, we don't tell people what to do, right. And we don't tell them what projects to work on. Right. Like, is that really
Sometimes
true?
Sometimes associates tell me what to do, which is 9,000 of them. Absolutely, and I think the other key difference that we talked about as far as what's different in Gore, leadership plays a very different role. The leader is not the person that just arrived and now they're responsible, and so they kind of tell the organization what to do, which is very traditional. In traditional companies, there's a lot of pressure on that leader to have both the answers but also to kind of direct their reports. The way we look at it is leaders have to do it through influence. And so, I don't tell associates what to do. I might try to influence them that this is really important for us to focus on. And the difference is you want that individual to feel the ownership. You want them to understand why it's important. And the energy and commitment shifts dramatically. So rather than the leader is the one that has the passion and they're the one that has the conviction, what you really want is that energy to shift to the broader organization. And so if I told someone what to do, they probably would do it. But the ownership and the commitment, they're doing it for me, and it's something I believe in. It's so much more powerful when it's actually felt by the whole organization, and they're equally committed to that outcome.
But if you're letting them run with their passion and what they want to do, how does this not turn into just herding cats? How do you get alignment?
It's never going to be all in a nice, neat, structured package. What we try to do, though, is to really make sure everyone's operating with kind of common foundation of values and beliefs. And so when you join Gore, the assumption is you buy into the things that we think are fundamentally important. That belief in individual, that commitment to help each other be successful, kind of the approach we take in our philosophy to taking a long-term view. So you have to establish a common foundation and values. I think that leadership...
What are those? What are those common values that employees...
For us, certainly, again, one is the belief in individual, that we really respect and believe everyone can make a significant contribution. If you give associates the knowledge and the tools, they will just flourish. And so that's certainly one. The second is the power of small teams, that as we get larger, we want to still keep and continue to have associates that really feel part and connected with their team to make a difference. The other one is that we're all in the same boat. The Gores loved analogies with ships. And so the concept here is that it's, even though small teams can do a lot, but we do much more as a ship. The entire enterprise benefits when we're all successful. So we really try to align all of our practices that truly reinforce that our success ultimately is with us collectively together. And the last one is that we really want to take a long-term view. A lot of businesses, as you can imagine, are under a ton of pressure to deliver short-term results. And so we've always felt that our success is not financially driven alone. That's certainly one piece to keep the enterprise healthy, but how healthy is the work environment? Are we really reaching out in the communities, and are we building our reputation? Are we driving innovation? So those are the things that we try to reinforce in our practices, and that's really what we try to instill in our associates.
Okay, so let's get practical here. I'm an associate at Gore. I have a great idea for an application of the Gore technology. How do I get money? How does my idea get money?
Well, there's a lot of internal selling. And so just as I mentioned, leaders need to do a lot through influence. Every associate has that responsibility, because job one is you've got to convince others that your idea is a good idea. And frankly, when you're in the innovation mode, not all ideas bubble up to be great ideas. And so there's kind of a selection process that happens naturally of how much passion does the individual have? Are they able to get other associates to believe in their idea? And so that fundamentally is kind of the first phase. And then as we actually invest in some of these areas, we actually like the peer review process to really make sure the best ideas bubble up. Because one of the constraints every organization has is investment in resources, whether it be people or finance. And so what's a process that you can actually vet those ideas that it doesn't require the leader to come in and tell the team your project's funded, your project's not. So we try to flip that around and create what we would call success factors. Here are the things that are critically important in terms of things that we feel make our company successful. We then let the teams actually look at these different projects and then map out which ones are the most attractive and which ones are the least attractive. Associates want to work on the things that they can make the greatest impact, because the way they get rewarded is through peer evaluation. The way that works is you may have a team working together and they're asked to rank each of the associates that they know well, who is making the greatest contribution to the success of the enterprise. We don't give them a lot of criteria, so they have to really think about impact on their project, impact in terms of their building teams, helping to mentor. So it's a very comprehensive view of contribution. And associates know that. So, and we're a pretty competitive organization, and so you can imagine no one wants to get ranked last. So there's a built-in mechanism that everyone wants to be viewed by their peers as making the greatest contribution. And so what that allows...
So it's a forced rank. I mean, you're forced number one, number two, number three.
Exactly. Once you've figured out what that ranking looks like, we then plot compensation. And those that are making the greatest contribution are paid accordingly. And so what it removes from the system is that it's not by default the leader gets paid the most, or the person that has the most seniority, or the person that's the most vocal. We really want it to come from our values and from the organization. And I think that has really helped serve as a great, I'd say, counterbalance to make sure that ultimately people understand that our success is very much going to be developed and measured by the organization, not just a key few.
Well, not defining it so clearly and specifically, it's your contribution toward the success of the organization in any number of ways that can be assessed.
And one thing I'm sure in every organization you find is people sometimes will confuse what I need to do to be successful and make more money versus what really is my passion. And so this helps people really drive what they're passionate about, where they can make a contribution, which, ideally they're making a bigger impact when you've got that alignment versus they're feeling they have to only one path to be successful, which may not be true to who they are or true to their strengths.
Yeah. Another phrase I saw was you guys have more coaches than bosses. You know, what do you mean by that?
The notion that the leader is responsible for mentoring, coaching, sponsoring the whole organization is very limiting when you think about it. And one of the concepts that, again, was put in place early on in Gore was the role of a sponsor. And sometimes it does get confused with leadership, but the notion is that each person in Gore has a personal sponsor, someone that has made a commitment to their development, maximizing their contribution to the organization. And what's important and powerful with that is the sponsor truly understands their job is to help that associate grow and develop, challenge them, but also to look at where, what career path makes the most sense.
And it's not their supervisor.
No, and sometimes we have a leader that's playing both roles, but they have to understand what hat they're wearing. Because if you're a leader, you're also trying to maximize the business success. And so you obviously focus on your associates and teams, but it's not that same personal level of trust of what truly does this individual need to be successful. And so we have found both the separation of the roles so people really understand taking care and helping our associates grow and develop is so important. We don't want to leave it to just, again, the leadership role. And that has been a truly powerful model because not all people have that trust and relationship with their leader. And so this allows them to have a sponsor that really believes in them. They have a different level of trust, so they can have different kinds of conversations, and sometimes very personal about their ambitions and certainly where they need to develop. And so that concept of sponsorship and really separating it from the role of a leader, we have found to be extremely valuable to accelerate the growth and development of our associates.
One of the things that I found fascinating was that you guys don't like to have your plants grow to more than 200 or 250 associates around the world. Now, typical engineering economies of scale thinking would say have one big plant,
right,
drive costs down. This has got to be an expensive strategy for you guys to keep your plants at 200, 250. Why do you do that?
One of the important roles of leaders is figuring out how to divide so that we can multiply. And it is counterintuitive because I think there's a sense that as you get larger, you get the leverage and the critical mass. We have found quite the opposite. So it is true, it is an investment. Just like our investment in people and relationships, you build new plants. We've got 18 plants in 25-mile radius, even here in the Eastern Cluster. What you find, though, is a very different level of engagement, ownership, and people reach out to build those relationships. One thing you find in a large plant, if you have 1,000 people, you know how hard it is to build relationships and try to actually figure out who's working in the facility? And unfortunately, over time, what happens is it really doesn't have a personality. It doesn't have that sense of team and the team spirit. And so we find that, keeping it to about 200 associates. Bill Gore did some interesting calculations that there's a certain number you cross over where you kind of start getting the diminishing collaboration. So the benefits of having a group together and sharing kind of different perspectives starts to cross over with the diminishing return of collaboration. And it was right around about 150 to 200 associates.
Is this thing scalable? Can it go global?
The interesting part of the story is Bill Gore received that challenge when there was 100 associates going to 200 associates. And so now we have 9,000 associates, and it absolutely is scalable. And I think the reason for that is if you go across to Germany or Japan or China and all of our global organizations, what binds us together is that common set of values. Who doesn't want to be believed in? Right. Who doesn't want to feel that they can make a difference? And so there's nothing that is regional about that. And so that is what allows it to scale, that those fundamental beliefs are transferable across multiple locations. The trick is that the practices and how the culture works may need to be adapted to that local environment. And so that's where you have to also respect the differences and make it work based on how we conduct business. But what brings us together is that common set of values. And I think that's the beauty of this. It's more than scalable because it's all based on beliefs that I think are very important to society.
What are the practical things that you do to protect culture here at Gore? Because that seems to me to be the driver of so much.
Absolutely. And so in our hiring process, critical. If you think about our culture is made up of the associates that are part of it. And so the culture comes alive through their actions, their beliefs, their values. So we spend an incredible amount of time in kind of behavioral interviewing to truly make sure that the person that we're bringing in the organization, this truly fits their beliefs and their values. And then another key piece is the leadership. The leadership sets the tone for the values. And clearly the whole organization is watching whether their actions and decisions truly align. And our culture, we make it visible every day.
There was one particular phrase that I thought, no, that's an interesting phrase. I didn't know what it meant. If you could explain it. What is the waterline principle here at Gore?
One thing Bill Gore did recognize is he hated policies and manuals. Certainly we have some, to be compliant with the law. But he really was concerned that if everything's kind of put into a manual that tells people what to do, one, it's not tapping into their wisdom, and every situation is different. So he didn't want that, but he knew he had to put some things in place that really help guide associates' decisions and actions. And the waterline concept is that if you're going to consider an action, whether it be investment or something, a decision that could put the enterprise at harm, the waterline goes back to our ship analogy, that we don't want to drill holes below the waterline because it could sink the ship. And you had tremendous freedom above the waterline. So it
experiment, to try things
it was
out.
Also geared to encourage risk-taking so that, within your waterline, you can drill lots of holes above. But when you start to think about things that could hurt our reputation, could hurt our financial success, could harm, our work environment, you really should and need to consult with other knowledgeable associates.
Well, what I love about that is that every associate really owns the entire enterprise, not just their little niche of what they're doing. They have to exercise their judgment to say, you know what, if we allocate too many resources to that great idea, it's too risky right now. For whatever reason, let's don't do it.
And that's where having associates build that broader network so they have exposure not just to what they're working on, but they also have knowledge what else gives them a better kind of perspective on what's important to the enterprise as well.
Leadership is defined by followership here at Gore. Talk about that. What makes a leader here at Gore?
Certainly we look at it more that they're only a leader if there are people that want to follow them. And the real power of that is the leader always knows that they have not arrived. It's not that they have this responsibility now and they can command the organization. They understand that they're earning that respect and that followership every day. And so they're really working for the organization. They're not working for a superior. They clearly understand that they have to continue to gain followership. And through our contribution process that I described, you start to see who is creating that leader, who is leading and getting that followership. So there's a really good reinforcement mechanism that we can monitor that so that leaders truly don't get there because of seniority or popularity or because they have a title by their name. They get there because they have unique strengths and they're acknowledged by their peers that they truly are leading.
One of the things that I also found was that leaders take a lot of time explaining their decisions. In a power and control environment, this is my decision, implement it, go for it.
Get over it.
Yeah, whatever. In this environment, I just saw a lot of evidence of leaders spend a lot of time explaining themselves and the reasoning behind things.
Absolutely, and that's something that we encourage with leaders, that your role does shift. And in other organizations, they may think that is just wasted time. We think that is precious time. That reaching out to the organization, getting them to understand the rationale behind decisions. One thing I'm always stressing with our leaders, we have our culture that we have on the wall, our poster. They need to bring it to life, right? They need to be using that language in their decisions and their actions, because that's what reinforces to the organization that we really do mean it and we walk the talk.
Now, with so many empowered leaders who have this freedom and boundaries and all of that, what's your job as a CEO?
Stay out of the way.
Of all these leaders.
I think
what does your job look like in an environment like this? So one of the beauties,
and I'm guessing it's easier in Gore because we're in so many diversified markets and products that I couldn't even attempt to be the most knowledgeable, spokesperson for the organization. So that temptation, goes away. But, I look at my job. One is the Gores put a beautiful cultural foundation in place 50 years ago. It needs to continue to adapt and change based on the current environment. So a lot of my energy is around how do we make sure that we stay true to our values, but our practices and how we think about the culture continues to adapt and be relevant in today's world. So that's clearly where I put quite a bit of my energy. The other is to help provide that broader framework. So again, what is important to the organization? How do we continue to get better as an organization? And we have areas that we have challenges as well. So I would probably put more energy into those areas to really reinforce why we need to put more emphasis over here. And I spend a lot of time with our leaders in terms of, are they really living up to the values? Is there alignment in terms of what's important for the organization?
Can anyone lead at Gore? Can an administrative assistant?
In fact, we had asked a question on our survey, do I view myself as a leader in Gore? And we had over 50% answer yes. And for us, the more the better, because basically if you have associates, if you had 9,000 associates all feel they're taking a leadership role, how powerful would that be? And I think there's such a tendency to kind of channel it into the single leader, and which looks very powerful because to that person maybe it is. But if you think about how distributing that leadership load where everyone feels they can make a difference, whether it be on their project or in leading a team or in leading lots of teams, so we really look at leadership in kind of the broadest sense in terms of how we want to encourage that and foster that throughout the organization.
As I came away from the interview, I couldn't help but think about the connections between the story of Gore and the challenge of leading a church. In the church, we all know that every member is a minister and owner of the cause. Everyone's to be equipped and raised up to make a contribution to the work of God. At Gore, everyone's an owner of the cause as well. No one's a hireling. They have associates, not employees. And while they grant incredible freedom at an individual level, they keep people focused and aligned by having very strong values, clear definition of success, and peer accountability. Coaching and mentoring are integral to the process. The team equips the individual as the individual contributes to the purpose of the team. Everyone develops as they are being developed. Sounds a whole lot like an ideal church environment. And it made me imagine what it would be like if every church was a place where people were constantly growing, developing each other, serving each other, holding each other accountable, spontaneously forming teams to eradicate all sorts of needs in our community and in our world. A church where leadership happens more by influence than position and title. I think that would be the kind of church that Jesus said the gates of hell wouldn't stand a chance to stop.